So this one's pretty wild. I think just the news itself is wild, but the implications are insane. Insane. And so I'm going to do a big, better produced video, an edited video talking about like the overall things that a lot of this X-Men news means for the X-Men plan, because it's pretty crazy. But let's just talk for now about the actual news itself, and let's kind of see how we feel about it. So Jeff Snyder broke some pretty crazy news last night from one of his oldest and best sources. Sadei Sink is reportedly Marvel's frontrunner to play Jean Grey in the MCU. Now, I want to give a little context here. This means that they're casting X-Men right now. Okay, and one of the things Jeff brought up last night, which I thought was really interesting, was he was like, well, what are they casting this thing for? This would imply a couple of things. It would imply that the movie, X-Men, is shooting sooner than maybe we thought. In fact, Jeff speculated it could be shooting early 2026 to get ready for a late 2027 release, which is interesting. There's not a director attached to this thing, but we know Marvel was courting writers for this over a year ago. And there have been some leaks and rumors that have come out about what their take's going to be, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, so it means, number one, X-Men happening real quick. Number two, it's possible that she is being cast by the Russo brothers for the Avengers, or rather for the Avengers movies, meaning mostly Secret Wars. Now, that's a whole thing. Again, I want to get more spoilery and talk about some of the other things that we've heard in the video. That should drop over the weekend for you guys. It's going to be juicy. But let's just talk about the news itself a little bit more here, okay? So, Sadei Sink. I think young actress. I think a good actress. Obviously, a big name because of Stranger Things. Correct me if I'm wrong. Did her character die? I don't think she dies in Stranger Things, right? So I think we'll see more of her in this last season. I actually got to rewatch Stranger Things. It's been so long since I watched the last season, I can't remember if she's dead or not. But assuming she's not dead, she'll probably have a big pop in popularity when the second season of Stranger Things comes out, which should be relatively soon. Big deal. Big name actress. I think she's right for the role. I know some people don't love it. I actually think she's good. She's obviously a younger Jean, but I think she's good. It's also, like, if you think about the comics, when Jean is first brought on by the Professor, she's pretty young. In fact, she was originally known as Marvel Girl. In the same way that the Invisible Girl was the first way that Sue Storm was known until she became the Invisible Woman. So Jean Grey, the Marvel Girl, with her old Marvel Girl costume, I think a much younger actress kind of works for that. And I also think that this probably is a good move for longevity. Meaning, similar to the Infinity Saga, the Mutant Saga is probably going to go for a good bit, and they're going to want consistency with those characters. So the actors and the actresses that they're approaching for the different X-Men roles are long commitments. And I do think Sadie, being so connected to that Netflix show for so long, is seemingly comfortable with being locked into sort of long-term arrangements. Right? So I think it makes sense from the business perspective for a number of different reasons. I really like the Jean Grey character. And it's curious with getting an actress like Sadei Sink, because I think she's young. I think she's going to mature a lot over the next couple of years. And I think her connections to some of the weird stuff that happened in Stranger Things could open up some interesting visual possibilities. Jean's really cool, but I mean, I think the thing we're all really thinking about here is Dark Phoenix. Are they going to do Dark Phoenix again? How are they going to handle that? I mean, we've had 2 botched versions of Dark Phoenix. Dark Phoenix is one of the coolest comic book stories ever. It's going to be interesting to know if Kevin Feige is going to do that again. And if he does, I think Sadie's like a brilliant person to do that with, because I think she can play dark. And I think that darkness would be really well juxtaposed against the more softer, sweeter side. I mean, most of the time when we see her in Stranger Things, she's like innocent, has sort of a softer demeanor. But then like there's some creepiness too when she like floats in the air and her eyelids peel back and stuff like that. It gets a little weird. So I think from that perspective, it's really brilliant casting too. She can play subdued, gentle Jean, and then show us shades of darkness that would be really interesting. I think she's got the chops for that. Now, there's a couple of things that are curious about this. Because, again, number one, it does seem like, according to Jeff, right, that the Russo brothers are likely involved in this. Wouldn't be the first time that Marvel and the Russos are casting a character which will first show up in something outside of their own franchise. The most famous example is Spider-Man. Spider-Man is cast by Marvel, and the Russos had a part in it, for Civil War. He then goes on to become like the star of his own franchise and become a major player in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. But this would not be the first time that Marvel Studios would cast for a future franchise and put it in an ensemble piece before that happens. So let's just consider that maybe this is for Avengers Secret Wars. Interestingly, this lines up with some comments that Kevin has recently made where he said, I think you'll see the story of Secret Wars setting up something really interesting for the mutants after that. So with those comments in mind from Kevin, it really does seem like you might get some of the new and some of the old X-Men for Secret Wars. And a lot of those choices will probably carry over into the soft reboot with the Mutant Saga. What I personally think this means is that X-Men universe that we see at the end of the Marvels, which we've only seen Binary, Beast, and we've made mention of Charles Xavier. We don't even know what the Charles Xavier looks like in that universe. We all assume it's Patrick Stewart, but we don't really know. I'm kind of thinking this is the Jean of that universe. There's also crazy rumors that like there's a Hulk, Wolverine, X-Men, Avengers movie going into production. It's going to film at the end of next year. Is she involved in that? I'm not really sure, but I think overall, really good casting pick here too. There's one other gripe that I have this, and I think it throws a little bit of a monkey wrench into this situation, and that has to do with Wolverine. Okay, so let's just get this out there on Front Street. The age gap between Sadei Sink and Hugh Jackman is crazy. And there are long-standing rumors that Hugh Jackman is the Wolverine. He is still going to be Wolverine after the soft reboot. Now, I guess with that kind of comes a question of like, okay, so he's maybe the new Wolverine, but is there another Wolverine? Like, is he going to remain and then there's like a new one? I don't know about that. Is it possible that audiences would not actually have an issue with this? Because Wolverine is in love with Jean Grey. I mean, there's that moment in X-Men 97 where Jean has like trouble connecting back to her own memories, and Logan asks Jean to read his mind. And she says something like, you think and feel all that about me? And he says something like, all that and more. It's a really emotional scene. It's like powerful. It's a great way to like take that relationship in the comics and like put it on display in a really, really emotional way in X-Men 97. But here's the thing. I say all of this about the age gap, right? And I'm like, it feels a little problematic. But here's the other thing. In comics, their age gap is actually way crazier. Logan is hundreds of years old. Hundreds of years old when he meets Jean Grey. And she's like 20, maybe younger. And he falls in love. So their actual age gap is like 100 plus years. The age gap of the actors is only like, I don't know, 50 or something like that, right? It'll be kind of wild. So yesterday when they were talking about this, you know, Jeff had kind of said he maybe thought there would be a new Wolverine cast. Rocha said he thought that wasn't going to be the case. I think I'm kind of more in agreement with Rocha. Like from what I've heard, that's not going to be a thing. But I guess it could be Henry Cavill. It could be somebody else. Like they could get a Wolverine. But at the end of the day, I don't know that they're going to cast Wolverine young enough for this issue to go away completely. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, Wolverine is not a young guy, and he doesn't look young. So, like, I don't know how you even cast a new Wolverine and not have this particular issue. And then it's like, okay, is this something that Marvel's going to just try to keep away from? Like, is this something Marvel's just going to be like, well, maybe our Wolverine doesn't love Jean? Well, I don't know. I don't like that either. I don't know what the solution is, but I don't like that shit either. Now, one last note on this before we kind of break into the chat and see what you guys think about this. We don't know this for sure, but this is kind of my speculation here. For this to be leaking out as maybe one of the first of the new X-Men would imply to me that Jean is very important, either to the story of Secret Wars, which could completely be the case because the white hot room, the M'Kraan crystal, these are technically gateways to the multiverse. I've been fascinated to know how the Phoenix Force would actually be involved in Secret Wars because it is involved in Jonathan Hickman's Secret Wars. This implies that Jean is super important. Super important to potentially Secret Wars and to potentially the story that Kevin wants to tell with the X-Men after the soft reboot. Otherwise, I think we'd be hearing about the other casting choices, right? Could they do a thing like they've done in the comics where there's young Jean and old Jean? Because this happened at one time. There was a moment in the comics where some of the young versions of the X-Men come out of the time stream and are brought in to the present day, and they are interacting with older versions of themselves. That could be what's going on. But either way, this implies that this is very important to what Kevin Feige is cooking with regards to the X-Men and all of that. So, look, I think this is great casting. I'm really excited. I have some questions. I have a few concerns. But overall, I think this is great casting. So, exciting news. Sadei Sink, the front runner to play Jean Grey.